The second chapter. So let's see what is the second chapter on module 1. So they call it module 2, but it's the second chapter of module 1. So it has some topics, more of the OS operating system of the devices. What are the Cisco operating system, Cisco iOS device systems? We will see how these systems are actually configured. What is basically the operating system for Cisco devices. So what is Cisco iOS? So any operating system, especially in Ubuntu or Linux-based operating system, we have got what we call shell, which is the user interface part. Shell. You can have CLI command-based or graphics-based interface, and we have got kernel, the communicating part between the software and hardware, so devices, any computers, they actually use this modality. So the shell is the one which is close to the user or the client, and we have got the kernel between the softwares and hardwares. So the kernel is the communicating or the intermediary part of in any operating systems, like in Linux or Ubuntu Linux-based operating systems. So graphics-based operating systems, Windows, we have got a nice graphics. So most of, for example, we have got Ubuntu is another graphics-based operating system. So operating systems, they can be, most of them actually are graphics-based because they are easy for users, user-friendly. Actually, when we use this graphics-based OS. But in servers, commonly servers, they are command-based because they are operated by expertise, and you just do the tasks by command. What is the purpose of any OS? OS is actually the brain of any system. So you have to order using the OS. You just manipulate the computer. So PC, it needs some operating system. So we use operating system for devices like switches, routers. They have OS. Cisco, they have their own operating system, which is actually Linux-based. It was derived from Linux, so command-based. So this operating system needs to be configured, or you have to interact with that OS to manipulate it. For example, if you see this OS, it is command-based OS. Linux was actually command-based. Ubuntu, or the derivative of this are graphics-based, Windows-like operating systems. But in devices like switches and routers, you have got what you call this command-based. There is no graphics for configurations, especially in this switches and routers. But there are some switches which have actually graphics for configuration purpose. So what is the way to access any switch? You need a console. Directly, you need a console. So initially you need a console, but after you have configured it, you can actually connect to switches or routers using the network, which is SSH is one. Second is telnet. SSH is more secure, but telnet is not secure. But using network or through the cable, using the IP address of the devices, you can connect using SSH or telnet. I think we will see some configurations of this. So we use, for example, if we are going to use what you call the console, we have to use some terminal emulation programs. PuTTY, Terata, Secure, these are open source. They are free. You can download them. For Windows, for Ubuntu, you can these are very simple programs. You can download them. So you connect console to the switch, and then after connecting your console, after downloading this, when you click PuTTY, for example, you have got this one. host IP address or physical. If it is, for example, if it is directly with console, you have to use actual serial directly. So if you want to connect it using SSH or telnet, serial means console. So what are the commands? So you have got 3 or 4 types of commands. User execution mode, which is actually the initial part. We need, for example, access any router or switch. You will see router with this minus or greater means greater sign, which means you have execute mode. So after that, you can actually escalate your privileges by privilege escalation, some commands. So you go to privileged mode. If you say, for example, from this, you say enable, you go to what you call privileged mode for configuration. But after you have this, what you call privileged mode, you have to actually use other commands to configure it. A global configuration mode, for example, config terminal. If you want to configure it, like global configuration is name, IP address. This configuration is globally. You can globally configure switches, and after that you have to actually configure each interface of a switch or a router, especially a router. So line configuration modes are line is for example auxiliary SSH communications. You need to configure the lines, and you may configure the interfaces. Each interface of a router you have to configure it. Even in switches you may need to configure it. So you have to go to that interface. For example, you see line is config if you are in the interface, config line if you are in the line, config, which is global configuration mode. So privilege escalation, yeah, you say enable. From enable you have got this hash sign, and then you can exit. If you exit, you just go back to the initial state. From enable you can say config t to the global configuration. You have to say config t after this hash, config t to configuration to configure global configuration mode. So after global configuration you can exit. If you want to go, for example, to the line or to the interface after you enter to global configuration, you have to say line console. This is for the console. If it is for other lines, like for example auxiliary lines, you say line auxiliary or something. I think we will see that configuration. And you say line console is for the console cable. So that console cable can be configured for a password or something, some privileges. So you have to go to that line and enable some passwords or do some tasks. So line console 0 is the console, because we have got one console, one interface. It is named as line console 0. If you go to interfaces, like for example interface fast Ethernet 01 is the first fast Ethernet. It may be 48 port switch or 24 port switch. If you need that interface, you have to actually interface is necessary. This is interface. Line is for console and auxiliary lines. Interface is for that for each interface. So in any iOS command structure, you have got what you call prompt. Switch is, if it is a switch or a router, you can see some prompts. Command, what is that command? You need to do something, so you have to show. For example, show is one command. IP protocol is the keyword argument. Actually, IP protocol is the argument. So show me the IP protocol it's being used, and you may say ping. Ping is the command, and then you have got arguments for that one. So it is command based. Actually, command based. If you are familiar with Linux or some command based operations, it's so simple. So you have, for example, help. You may, for example, ping ? It will help you a lot. Sometimes something interface fast 01, there is some problem with that. So fast Ethernet, it indicates that arrow, up arrow, indicates you have got some problem there. Interface, fast, Ethernet, 01. There is some invalid command, so you have to troubleshoot such kind of problem. So you may have some tab is very handy. You start writing, and then when you tap, it completes space. The command will be complete. Backspace is for deleting, left, right arrow. These are very common handy shortcuts. Control C, Control Z to, for example, come back. Control C, Control Z. If you are stuck, for example, you may say Control C or Control Z. Control C, Control. These are some short keys. So, for example, if I want to configure a device like in the packet tracer, configure terminal. You say configure terminal. Then in global configuration mode, you have to name it host name switch blah blah blah. So name of the switch will be changing now. SW flow blah blah. You can name it in whatever. If you want to delete that name, no name is possible. It's possible. You can just remove that name. Passwords are important. Switches, routers has to be secure. So you should actually configure passwords. Otherwise, you would have a problem if passwords are not configured. Somebody may log in or open that one and then may do some misses. So passwords are important. They have to be long. These are very common, more than 8 characters, for example, a combination of symbols and some tasks. It's some formula for generating passwords. So configuring password, for example, you have to say configure terminal, so configure that terminal, then line console 0, password Cisco. This means you are configuring the, for example, when you enter using the console, it will ask you for a password. So password Cisco. This is not a good password, but password Cisco. The password for console accessing is Cisco. So you have to say login and then int. Then when you try to actually log in, it will ask you for password for using the console. It will ask you for login. This is also for example, configure terminal enable secret class. This is secure way of actually enabling the password of console. This one is not secure. That one is more secure. Encryption. They use encryption. That one, that not. You may view the password actually in text, encrypted text. That one will be encrypted. But finally, after you do some configurations, it is good actually to say password encryption. I will see somewhere. So configure terminal, for example, line VTY015 means these lines are for SSA and daily communications. So line VTY015, we have that 16 lines for this access mechanism. So if you want to connect to a switch or a router using telnet or SSA, you can have 16 lines at a time, not more than that. So more than 16 lines are impossible. So you can have this all configured, or you can configure 4 lines so that 4 people at a time can actually have access to the switch. That means if you want to more lines, you can go up to 16. You can add more than that. So password is Cisco for that line. Login and is int. Login is important. So you initiate actually the process of password activation. So that when you start to learn to connect, you have to access. So line VTY is one for that kind of. So at the end of configuration, it is good to say service password encryption for encrypting the passwords. So service password encryption is important. So if it is an encrypted or plain text password, it will be encrypted by this command. Show running configuration is important. So if you say show running configuration, you will see what is, for example, This one, it is the password is encrypted. Liability wise password is you have got a lot of some unknown codes which means it is encrypted. Banner is important. This is actually for legal issue. Banner means when you open or try to access, it will tell you some information. So for legal issue, for example, unauthorized access only. Unauthorized access will charge you blah blah, or you can say something in this is, but this is not for security. This is for legal issue. Of if somebody while seeing this banner, if he try to access data, is illegal. So for legal issue, banner is important. It's good. Banner is good for legal issue. So configuration is, after you configure it, you have to actually save it. So after configuration, if you leave it, it will be actually lost. So startup configuration is the configuration which is stored in the NVRAM, non-volatile. So when we say, for example, copy running configuration, startup configuration, we are saving the configuration into the NVRAM. Running configuration is while we are actually accessing or doing some tasks, it is copied from the startup configuration to the running configuration. While we are configuring the device, we are at running configuration. So it has to be saved to have an effect next time you actually open the device. So startup configuration, it has to be copied into a startup configuration. After you do some configuration, you have to say copy running config startup config. It has to be copied into startup config. Configurations, you can, for example, if you configure something and you don't want to have that configuration and effect, just reload it to the initial state. You can reload it, or you can erase it. So you can erase every configuration and then you can make it to the default stance. So if you want, for example, the configurations to be saved while you are doing some tasks, you can configure the PuTTY or Keratin. You say logging or session outputs. You may put it somewhere. Browse your folder, local folder, and then it will be actually saved in the local folder or in your PC, so that later you can access it or see what you have done, what you have configured. Okay, so this is the steps. These are for saving your configurations. So we have what we call address, IP address. When you want to statically configure IP addresses, you have to, I think you know this very simple IP addressing protocol, static on IP, or if you want, you can make it dynamic. IPs, we have got two types of IP addresses, IP version 4 as well as IP version 6. This one is for IP version 6. And interfaces are important. In any, for example, this switch has many interfaces. These interfaces are fast Ethernet and Giga Ethernet interfaces. And you may see this wireless card is one interface. You may, so for these interfaces, they can be fiber interfaces. So they need SFP modules for changing that data, electrical data to light, back from light to electrical signal. So interfaces are mandatory. So if a switch doesn't have a SFP module, you cannot use fiber connection. But most of the switches, the modern switches have fiber interfaces. So when you configure, you can statically configure IP addresses for IP version 6 or IP version 4. You can say also automatic, dynamic, the DHCP configuration dynamically. The device can be configured by this. That means the DHCP can configure your device by requesting an IP address from the DHCP server. Switch virtual interfaces are switches. They don't need IP address for communication,
but you may want to actually log into the switch. So you have to configure the virtual interface, which is actually the interface VLAN. Most of the time, VLAN interface is the virtual interface. So you can have access to that switch remotely from the network using this IP address. You can actually access it when you want to access it through SSH or telnet. So a switch doesn't need IP address for communication, but if you want to access that switch, so switches are layer 2. By default, switches are layer 2. They don't need IP address. But if you want to access that switch, you need a virtual interface. Most of the time, VLAN 1 or VLAN 99 is common for. When we see VLAN, I will say as well.